My name is Douglas Rayburn. I'm originally from El Paso, Texas. That's where I grew up. Moved out here approximately about 6.5 years ago from Kentucky. I'll get to that in a little while. Growing up in El Paso, I moved to El Paso when I was probably about a little over 3.5. My dad was a career military man. He raised us the best we could. We never went without. Growing up, I can remember having a pretty much of a good childhood, a happy childhood. But I can also remember there was a lot of things going on behind closed doors that now as an adult I can understand. I can look back on my childhood and see it. There was a lot of verbal abuse, a lot of physical abuse. I'm not going to sit here and sugarcoat it. It was a very crappy situation at times. And then there came a moment in my life when I became a young, I guess 12 or 13. My mom ended up having to go through some serious surgeries for a tumor in her brain. And I can remember as a young age, people would talk to me about Jesus and try to lead me to God. And I had a fascination because we'd go to a Southern Baptist church here in El Paso, and the Bible studies always appealed to me. But the first time I can really recall enjoying church was a Catholic church with my friend Robin. And I really didn't understand it. It was like exercise, up, down, up. But I enjoyed it, and I enjoyed the message. But when all this hit with my mom, and a new kind of relationship between me and my father and my brother occurred, I remember going outside and getting in the bushes out front. There were these big, huge bushes. I can't remember what they were called. And I just remember the first time I ever talked to God, and I said, if my mom don't make it, you go to hell. Anyhow, from that moment, my life kind of went down, and I stayed that way. As a young person, I remember living angrily. There was very few happy moments in my life. As I got older and my mom went through these surgeries, I became more caretaker because my dad had to work. My brother and him had a falling out. He kicked my brother out, and I became the sole caregiver of my mom while my dad was at work. And eventually my dad, excuse the tears, my dad would want to go on fishing trips, and my dad had a drinking problem. And this led to confrontations between me and my father every time we'd go out, but I never gave up. I always went out. I always learned. And then eventually it all came to a stop, and I started going after different things. I was getting tired of going out and watching my dad get drunk. I was getting tired of being the only one caring for my mom and not having a life, so to say, as my friends did. And I started lingering to people that maybe I shouldn't have followed in that life. And eventually, an individual that I looked up to back home in El Paso said, you're either going to go to jail or you're going to die. He goes, you got to get out of here. And he goes, I'm not going to give you a choice. He goes, you either join the military or I'm going to kick your ass. He goes, I'm not going to give you a choice to die. I'm not going to give you a choice to go to prison. He goes, I'll kick you. I'm going to knock you down every time I see you. So I took the man's advice, and right out of high school I went in the military. And I got married at a very young age. And I come to find out in the military, I wasn't really suited for garrison, like being inside the garrison troops. You put me out in the field, I shined all day long. That's where I loved to be, was out in the field. In garrison, I didn't like it too much. My first duty station was Germany. And if you ain't never been to Germany, if you're a single man, that's paradise. I mean, the beer is flowing and the women are fine. I'm not going to lie to you. So I was caught up in the world. And then I come back here, after a stint overseas and going through the first Gulf War, and I come back here, and me and the wife start a family. We have a child, and I'm not enjoying it, and I'm starting to try to get away from my wife and my child. I don't fit in, and the day comes where they tell me that I can't do the job that I signed up to do anymore. I was in the armor, M1A1 tanks. I loved it. I mean, big, expensive dune buggy, go around, blow things up. It was awesome. But they told me I couldn't do it. And to stay in, I had to change my MOS. So I decided to change my MOS to something that wasn't combat related or combat arms. And the day I was supposed to give my orders to ship out, to go to Germany to do on-the-job training for my new job, they also came out and said, we're going to medically discharge you because of your back, which I injured. They medically put me out, and I decided to move my family to Kentucky because I didn't want to have my son raised in the same environment. The problem with that, where we come from, jobs there are very scarce. So I ended up getting into the construction field. I worked from anything from bars to construction. In 2002, I divorced my first wife. My second marriage had already started to fall apart. It was already dissolved. I was hooked on painkillers. I was drinking. I was in a very dark time. And everybody that I reached out to was in their own little battle. So there was no real help. And I had no one that was leading me to the Lord. And I didn't know how to call out for him. I really didn't believe in him. And I don't remember the month. I don't remember the date. I do remember it was probably the end of summer, close to the end of summer. I went into a very dark spot in my life where there was no light. And I said, enough is enough. I didn't think about my son. I didn't think about my family. I didn't think about anything. And I took my pistol, my .45, and I dropped the magazine out, took one round out, put it in the chamber and let the slide go forward. And I stuck the barrel in my mouth and pointed up. And I pulled the trigger. And it went click. I said a few choice words. I remember that. I eject the round, this bullet. I ejected this bullet. And I looked, and the primer had been hit. And I just kind of chunked it down. I grabbed another bullet out of the clip, put it in the well, let the slide go forward. And as I was sticking it in my mouth, we had those old block cell phones, those little square things. Well, mine started ringing. And it was a buddy of mine, and I answered it. And I said, "What's up, Chief?" And buddy from the military. And he goes, "I don't know what you're doing, but stop and throw it out the flipping window." But the word he said wasn't flipping. He said, "Throw it out the flipping window." And I went, "What?" He goes, "You heard me. Throw it out the flipping window." So opened the window up, took my weapon, and tossed it. Unbeknownst to me, I didn't know my dad was walking right by the window. And it come within probably about, he said, a foot from hitting him in the head. And I heard my buddy Joey on the phone saying, "I love you. Because you call me later." And he hung up. And I sunk back into the corner. And my dad, he come running in there. And when he looked at me, I remember him telling me probably about a year later, he said it was the first time he didn't see his son. He said he saw a fellow veteran. And I looked up. I said, "I need help." And he reached down and picked me up. and took me to the VA, which at that time it really wasn't a lot of help. But I went in there and I talked to a few nurses. I talked to a doctor. I told him, I said, yeah, I'm thinking about hurting myself. I said, I tried it already. But for some reason, I think it went down one ear and out the other. Because all he did was give me a prescription. It was always, here's a prescription for this. And I looked at it, and we got back in the truck, and we was heading back home. And I remember Dad saying, we're going to get you through this. And I'm not going to say I stopped giving up the drugs, and I'm not going to say I stopped drinking, and I'm not going to say I will stop raising hell, because I didn't. I just put it in my psyche that I wasn't going to be stopped. Nothing was going to stop me from doing what I wanted to do and how I wanted to achieve it, no matter what. I wasn't going to stop. However I was meant to go out is how I was meant to go out. That became my mentality from that day forward. Until God threw a block wall in my path. And that would be my wife today. And I think the prayers that people prayed for me were answered through her, because I needed somebody that was equally yoked, as the Bible says. Somebody that's not going to back down from who I am. And I didn't know Christ. I didn't know God. She came into my life by fluke, chance meeting through our sons. I knew her youngest son. It basically raised him. Pardon me. I hear stories how people find Christ, and I'm like, why didn't that happen to me? Why didn't I get boom all of a sudden? And I had come to realize that every individual's walk is different. It's a learning experience. And maybe I'm just so hard-headed, it takes me a while to take the next step. And when we were introduced and this relationship started growing, and I said, well, I'm going to go ahead and find out what church is truly about. And her mom, who is a strong Pentecostal woman, met me. And she would come over to the house, and she found out that I was kind of tipping my toes into the church. She would come over, and the first thing I would tell her as I was cracking open a beer, would tell her, don't try to be preaching at me, you know it ain't going to work. And she would just hug me and laugh, and she'd go in and talk to her kids and drive them nuts. They'd come running out. She'd come out and sit with me and let me talk the way I wanted to talk. And I didn't realize the whole time she had her hand on me, she was praying. And I decided I'm going to watch a movie. And I got ready to sit down and I watched the movie. And I was getting ready to hit the play. My front door opened. And I looked, and it was my wife standing there. And I was like, what in the world? And I closed my eyes and went like that. And I opened them up, and it was closed. The door was shut. I said, that ain't right. Something ain't right. So I called my wife and got her voicemail. I said, give me a call. I just want to check on you. So she called me, and she said, what's going on? Are you okay? And I said, yeah, just something happened. And at that instant, it was like a shadow fell over me. And I wish I could you can't make this stuff up, but it was like a shadow fell over me. But it wasn't a cold shadow. It was like an embrace, being hugged. And I just fell. And I hit the floor hard enough where I busted my nose, and it was bleeding. And I remember getting myself, people can think I'm crazy if they want, but I propped myself up on my wife's study chair that was in our dining room. And as I was getting up, there was a set of feet. And I remember seeing pierced feet. And I lost it. And I confessed everything right then and there. And the baby steps that I took where I wasn't hungry for the word, I was in his word that moment on 24/7. And to this day, I can't get out. I didn't understand that at that time. And I didn't understand how God can reach into somebody who feels absolutely worthless about themselves and find where their worth is truly about. And it's taken me years to reach there, and how much I'm truly worth. And I can honestly sit here today and say, after the suicide attempt, after my struggles with addiction, not just the alcohol or the pills, but pain. You become addicted to pain. You want it. You crave it. If you're not hurting, you're wanting to hurt others. You're wanting people to feel what you're feeling. It's taken me years to break out of that through Christ. And I can sit here today and tell you that I'm priceless. There's no amount of money you can put on my head. And it all begins with that bullet. I can look back on my childhood and go, oh, poor woe is me. I got my butt whooped, or I got beat on this day, or I had to go through this kind of abuse when I was a kid. That's a pity pot. That's an excuse. We all have that testimony, and mine begins with this bullet, because I can look back and go, wow, he stopped that primer from going off. He stopped me from pulling the trigger a second time. Through a friend of mine who to this day doesn't even profess to know Jesus Christ. There's hope out there, man. And I'm here to tell you, don't be afraid to reach out and say you need it. Veteran, non-veteran, the struggle's real. If you're in that dark spot, it's time to reach. That's it. That's all I got to say, man. God's good each and every day. I may not be waking up smiling all the time, but my heart is joyful.